Namaskar. We will be continuing with our discussion on the sociological influences on consumer decision making, and we shall be discussing module 7.6 today, which is interpersonal communication and influence. So we shall be speaking about this module in 1 hour, and we shall be covering topics like interpersonal communication, word of mouth communication, dynamics of word and mouth communication, the interpersonal flow of communication theories, the two-step theory and the multi-step theory, and relevance of interpersonal communication and influence for a marketer. So we shall be covering these topics in this particular hour on our session on interpersonal communication and influence. So beginning with interpersonal communication, as you know, we have discussed communication earlier, and we have discussed the communication process, which was defined as an exchange of ideas between sender and a receiver, with the sender encoding the message, the receiver decoding it via a channel or via a media, and the receiver following it up with a feedback mechanism. So the same process works here in terms of interpersonal communication and marketing, where we speak of this interpersonal communication with respect to the marketing and consumption behavior in terms of the word of mouth communication. So as consumers, while we think of making purchases, we go through this process of communication, and there are two kinds of communication. One is communication from the marketer, and another is communication which takes place between consumers themselves. So marketing communication is any form of communication that takes place between the seller and the buyer, or between the marketer and the consumer, and this kind of an exchange of ideas with respect to the product or the price or the place or the promotion, and all of it actually comprises of what we refer to as marketing communication. It is essentially the communication that takes place between marketer and a consumer, and pertains to the 4 Ps, or to the consumption process, or to consumer behavior. And this process is initiated by the marketer and essentially takes place through the communication mix or the promotion mix. Now there's another kind of communication which we refer to as interpersonal communication, which takes place between consumers themselves. So you know, this interpersonal communication, it operates interpersonally with family, friends, peers, colleagues, strangers, opinion leaders, who talk about a product or service offering, its attributes, benefits, features, the various brands, the prices, the stores, or even the advertisement that is portrayed on broadcast media or on print media. So this kind of communication that takes place between family, friends, peers, colleagues, strangers, opinion leaders is referred to as interpersonal communication. And this particular lesson deals with this kind of communication, which is actually communication that takes place between buyers, or between prospects, or between a buyer and a prospect, or between a buyer and an opinion leader, and so forth. So as a process, it is similar to any communication process. There is a two-way exchange of information that happens between two people, and there is a channel, there is a media, and all of the components which we saw in the communication process are also seen in this interpersonal communication process. There is a source, there is a message, there is a encoding that takes place, there is a medium, there is a receiver, there is decoding that takes place, and there is a feedback, and there is also noise. But the focus here is on the word consumer. So it's going to take place between consumers, or between a prospects, or between a consumer and a prospect, and the focus lies on individuals purely as consumers or as buyers. It is different from marketing communication in the sense that interpersonal communication takes place between individual consumers, between buyers, while marketing communication essentially takes place between a buyer and a seller, or a seller and a buyer, or between the marketer and the consumer. So while interpersonal communication is that happens between consumers, between buyers, or between buyers and prospects, marketing communication happens between the marketer and the consumer. So this is the difference between the both of them. Now let us speak about word of mouth communication. So any kind of informal interpersonal communication that takes place between individuals who function as or who behave as consumers is known as word of mouth communication. So any exchange of ideas, any informal information exchange or interpersonal communication that takes place between individuals as buyers or as consumers is referred to as word of mouth communication. So people discuss as buyers, they discuss a lot of things. They discuss about product and service offerings which could fulfill their needs and wants. They talk about products, they talk about services, they talk about brands. They also talk about product features, benefits, attributes. They talk about the pros and cons of using different brands or different alternative offerings. They discuss prices. They talk about sales, discounts. They talk about payments. They talk about negotiation. They talk about the advertisement, or anything and everything relevant to the to the buying process is discussed between consumers, and this entire communication that takes place is referred to as word of mouth communication. So it basically is regarded as a relational concept in the sense that it actually refers to an informal relationship between two or more consumers. So it's a very relational concept that talks about the informal relationship that develops between consumers or between buyers and prospects, or between buyers and opinion leaders, or prospects and opinion leaders, and so forth. So it's an interaction that takes place between two individuals who function as consumers, and this relationship is purely, and this exchange is purely relational in the sense that it leads to forging of relationships also. So an informal relationship tends to develop between people who are involved in this interpersonal communication. Now, the various factors that affect a word of mouth communication are: 1, the message and its information content; 2, the receiver and his purpose in gathering information; 3, the source and his purpose in providing information; 4, the credibility of the source; 5, the type of product or service offering; 6, the source's evaluation of the product and service offering; and 7, the type of communication partner. So when we talk about the various factors which affect interpersonal communication, we talk of these as the message and the information content, the sender and his purpose, or the source and his purpose of providing information, the receiver and his purpose of gathering information, the credibility of the source, the type of the product or service offering, the source's evaluation of the product or service offering or the brands, and the type of the communication partner. Now, all of these factors will constitute what we refer to as the dynamics of the word of mouth communication. So if we talk about the dynamics of word of mouth communication, we will start with the message, move on to the receiver, to the sender, to the credibility of the source or the sender, to the type of communication partner, to the source's evaluation of the product or service offering, and to the type of communication partner. So let us discuss about these various constituents of the word of mouth communication. We will start with the message, and a message here will maybe different messages here may be of different kinds, and they'll assume different forms. We have a message strategy, we have a media strategy, we have a creative strategy. Now the message is going to be put forth and given a creative form. So there is something to do about the message, which is what to say and how to say. So what to say and how to say it symbolically as well as how to say it logically. So the message here may assume different forms, but nevertheless the content here or the message itself actually comprises three components. It could, the message here could be classified into 3 types. The first is the product news, the second is the advice, and the third is personal experience. So we start with what is product news, what is advice, and what is personal experience. These are all of these could be the basis of a message. So when we talk of a message, the message could be in the form of either a product news, or it could be in the form of advice, or it could be in the form of personal experience. Now, let us talk first about product news. So, product news is any information that the consumer gathers during his search process. So, any kind of information about the product, about the brand, about the product attributes, benefits, features, about the various varying alternatives. All of these basically comprise what we refer to as product news. So, product news is information that a consumer gathers for the purpose of making his purchase during the search for information stage in the decision making process. The second is advice. Advice is in the form of statements or opinions and beliefs and value judgments made explicit, and they reflect the personal attitudes, opinions and views about product and service offerings or about brands. So these are statements, these are value judgments, these express opinions, these express beliefs about a particular product category or a brand. So it is more in the form of opinion. It is more in the form of a statement that exhibits attitudes, opinions, values and beliefs. And the third is personal advice. Personal experience. People also discuss their experiences with each other. As they communicate informally with family, with friends, with peers, with colleagues, or even with strangers, or even with opinion leaders, they share their experiences, they hear experiences of each other, and all of this actually takes the form of a message. So as people communicate informally with each other, they hear of personal experiences of others. So whether it is product news or advice or personal experience, any and all of these actually are the basis of a message. Now let us come next to the receiver and his objective in gathering information. The receiver basically, or here the consumer or a prospect, wants to gather information so that he can make the right purchase decision. He can make the right decision with respect to the product or service offering, the right brand at the right price, to be bought from the right store and at the right time. The receiver here wants to be very correct. He wants to be very accurate in his judgment or in his purchase decision with respect to a product or a brand. And in order to do so, he gathers information so that he can make the right decision at the right time, and with respect to a product or service offering, and he can buy it at the right price, at the right store, at the right time or right season. So this is what his objective is when he is thinking of making a purchase, and he is soliciting information from others. So this is his basis of gathering information, either through self or through word of mouth communication. Now consumers prefer word of mouth communication over marketing communication because they believe that marketing communication always has an ulterior motive, that of a sale, that of profits, that of revenue. But here in the case of informal interpersonal word of mouth communication, there is no ulterior motive, and so they feel that out of the two, out of interpersonal word of mouth communication and marketing communication, the former is more credible with no ulterior motive. So the former here meaning informal interpersonal word of mouth communication is regarded to be more credible, where there are no hidden or where there are no ulterior motives. Now there are a lot of other advantages of word of mouth communication, like word of mouth communication reduces the physical and cognitive effort that a consumer will have to expend with respect to gathering information, evaluating it, analyzing it and making the right decision. So the word of mouth information communication reduces the amount of physical effort that a person will have to spend in gathering information, as also the cognitive effort which he will have to put in to evaluate information and to make the right decision. The word of mouth communication also helps take advice or seek advice from a person who has knowledge, who has interest and who has an experience with a product or service category. So that in a way also tends to reduce the level of perceived risk associated with the product category. Consumers generally seek advice from people who are involved in a product category, or who have experience with the product category, especially if they are buying high involvement products. So in this that is how they go to experts, or they go to people who are highly experienced, and they also seek advice from what we call as opinion leaders, which is something which we will discuss in the next session. So when consumers, or when we should say prospects, go to such experts, or go to such people with experience, or go to such opinion leaders, they seek advice with respect to a product category or with brands, and he expects that he will be able to get the right advice, right information, and right experience, hearsay of experience from such people. And so this would reduce his level of perceived risk associated with the product or service category or with the brand. So it reduces the level of uncertainty associated with the product or with the purchase of a product or service offering or brand. So this is, of course, as I said, more to do with high involvement purchases. People look up to experts for advice. People look up to opinion leaders for advice. They also look at their, to seek help from their reference groups. And while experts provide them with knowledge which makes the consumers feel more sure about the product alternative, reference groups also have an impact, and they lead to an increased confidence about making a product or about buying a product or service offering that will make such consumers more socially acceptable and approved in a social structure. So consumers as prospects, they seek advice from experts, from opinion leaders, and from the reference groups in order to, one, reduce the level of physical and cognitive active effort, and two, to reduce the level of perceived risk. Now, when we talk about this, we will see that while the receiver has a purpose of seeking information or gathering information, the source also has a purpose in providing information. People provide information to others, sometimes voluntarily and sometimes when they are asked for it. They have a large number of reasons of providing information to seekers or to receivers, be it in the form of family or friends or relatives or even strangers. So some people, they like to just provide information voluntarily. They like to talk about a product or service category or about a brand, and they talk about in terms of the product news, or in terms of advice, or in terms of experience. On the other hand, there are in other cases this may not be voluntary, but is only information is provided when requested or when asked by somebody who is a prospect. So there are a large number of reasons why people like to talk or like to give information or share information about product or service categories or about brands, and they love to share information with family, friends, strangers, or acquaintances. Now, some of the reasons why people want to provide information or like to provide information are, one, they love to share their experiences with others. So they give news, they share advice, they give news, they share their experiences, they provide advice. And they love to share their experiences with others. Another reason why they provide information is because they are interested in a product category, and such kind of informal interpersonal word of mouth communication gives them a chance, or gives them an opportunity to talk about a product or service category which they are involved in, or which they are fond of, and which they are interested in. 3, some people act very benevolent, they act very generous, and they out of altruistic concerns, they like to provide assistance to others. So they if somebody says or even mentions that he or she wants to buy a particular product, say a refrigerator, so there will be some people around him who will love talking about refrigerators, the various brands, and they try to come forth with all help and assistance in the form of advice or opinion, so as to help the other person or the prospect to make the right choice. So out of their benevolence, out of his generosity, and out of a feeling of altruism, they like to provide assistance to others. Also, the other reasons are, some people derive a sense of accomplishment. They derive a sense of feeling very important, feeling very powerful when people approach them for information and advice. So this particular feeling, very feeling that somebody has approached them for help, or for product advice, or for opinion and judgment about what to buy and what not to buy. This very feeling gives them makes them feel very important, very powerful, and it gives them a sense of being important and feel very powerful when people approach them. In fact, they take a lot of pride in providing information, and this is very true of people who are opinion leaders. They love to talk about a product category which they are involved in, and they have a sense of pride that other people have approached them for assistance, for help with respect to the knowledge or with respect to information regarding a product category or a brand. So they out of their pleasure, out of their sense of pride in doing so, they try and help others. So these are some of the reasons why the source loves to provide information. Now, there's something very, very interesting which also could act as a purpose of providing information. Many people provide information because, one, they may be wanting to try out a new product or service offering after someone else uses it first. So here there is a motive, here there is an ulterior motive, that somebody, say X, provides advice to Y just because X wants Y to buy the product or the brand. Try it out, and if Y is happy with it, Y is successful with its use performance, Y is satisfied or delighted with it, then X would go ahead and buy. So here he has a motive that he wants the other party or other person to try it out first, and then subsequently he would buy. So he wants somebody else to try out a new product or service offering, and use it first, and subsequently he would want to use it. So he gives advice to others to buy, or he talks very favorably about a product or a brand, and he encourages another one to buy it. In another case, he may provide advice to reduce the level of cognitive dissonance that he has been facing. Just because X has bought the product or bought the brand and is in a state of anxiety, is in a state of tension, and with respect to whether he's made the right choice or not, and he is actually facing a situation of cognitive dissonance. So in order to rid himself of such a feeling of uncertainty, feeling of dissonance, and not to basically reassure himself that he has made the right choice, he also makes Y buy the same product. So X may be trying to reduce his own level of cognitive dissonance associated with the purchase, and so he wants Y also to jump into the purchase and make the same decision. Another reason why people would want to give information is when they want to reassure themselves that they have made the right choice. So in order to reassure them that they have made the right choice or right purchase decision, they recommend the same brand to others. And another reason why many people would provide information is that they are dissatisfied with a purchase, and they like to complain about the purchase of a product or a brand or a company or a store from which it has been purchased. So they talk negative word of mouth about it. So the person is unhappy with the purchase of a particular brand. He is dissatisfied. He wants to talk negative about the brand and about the store or the shop from which he has purchased it. So in this case also, he would like to talk voluntarily about it and give a lot of advice against the purchase of that particular brand. So these are all of the various reasons why the source wants to provide information, and that is his purpose of providing information. Now, this brings us to the credibility of the source. We have discussed earlier issues of credibility when we did communication earlier. The same holds true here. Just in the case of formal marketing communication, the credibility of the source is equally important here in informal interpersonal word of mouth communication. People look for such informal interpersonal word of mouth communication because they feel it is more credible, it is more trustworthy, it is more reliable, and there would be no hidden or ulterior motive. So what the receiver or what the prospect here expects is that whatever information he gets from the source or from the sender is something which is very dependable, very reliable, and so it's very important that the source or the sender must be very credible. So people have to look for information sources, informal information sources, rather than marketing communication, because they believe these sources to be more credible with no ulterior motives. Now, when is a source regarded as credible? A source is regarded as credible when he or she provides precise, accurate and unbiased information about a product or a brand. And credibility of the source here is based on his knowledge, on his expertise and his objectivity. Apart from family, apart from friends, consumers often turn to opinion leaders whom they attach a lot of credibility to, and people who are approached for information or who voluntarily provide information should make sure that the kind of information that they provide is credible, and they should be very careful that they provide the right kind of information, advice and personal opinion. So when we talk about credibility, we talk about the credibility of the source, and this credibility comes from knowledge, from expertise and comes from objectivity. And as consumers, as prospects, we turn to people who we find are credible, who we find are reliable with respect to the product news that they will share with us, or the advice that they will give to us, or the experiences that they will share with us. So people often turn to experts because they feel that experts, because of their expertise, will be credible. They turn to opinion leaders again because they feel opinion leaders are involved in a product category and would be able to provide the right kind of information. People also turn to family, to friends, to relatives because they trust them more and they feel that such sources could be credible and reliable. So it's very important that the source is reliable, it provides correct information, correct advice, shares the right kind of information, experiences, and will provide the correct personal opinion. Now, this brings us to the next component in the dynamics of word of mouth communication, which is type of product or service offering. Now, informal interpersonal communication is also affected by the type of product or service that a person desires to purchase. In fact, researchers have said that it is first affected by the needs and wants, and then it is affected by how the particular product or service offering would help satisfy a need or want. So, in this way, the type of product or service required to fulfill the need or want has a bearing on the dynamics of interpersonal communication. So, we start with the need. Based on the need, we have a product or service, and how well this product or service will help meet a particular need is what is of prime importance here. So, informal interpersonal word of mouth communication is impacted by the type of product or service category that a person is wanting to purchase. So, the type of product or service category required to fulfill needs has a bearing on the dynamics. Now, elaborating on this, we are basically talking about the nature of the product or service offering. So, if we go deeper into it, consumers will always seek information when the product is a high involving product, which is expensive, it is high value for money, level of perceived risk is high, when the product is such which is not going to be purchased very frequently, and action or purchase action is irrevocable, in the sense that once the product is purchased, you cannot go and return it. So, consumers seek information about such high involving products. Consumers also seek information about products which are technically complex, or either complex in terms of technology or in terms of usage. So, they seek information and advice when the product is expensive, when it is technically complex, when it is risky, and when it is not purchased frequently. Another case where consumers seek advice is when the product or service offering is new. Okay, it's something new to the consumer. It is something which is probably an innovation and or a new product, which has entered into the market, and the level of perceived risk associated with such new offerings is high. So they seek advice from others to reduce this level of perceived risk, and so that they can be reassured that they are making the right choice. Another case where consumers seek advice or seek opinion and advice and information is when the product relates to lifestyle, image, and social class. Now, in order to seek social approval, social acceptance, either in the group or in the in the family or in the reference group or in the social class. Also, in order to avoid any kind of fun or ridicule, consumers often need to buy, or they often prefer buying products which others are buying, others in their social class or others in the reference group are buying and using. So again, they look to others for advice, they look to others for opinion and judgments about the purchase of a particular product and or a brand. So they want to buy a particular product which other people in their social class or in their reference group are using or buying, and so they turn to them for advice when it comes to their purchase of such a particular product or brand, because until unless they buy this, it would not be they may not be socially acceptable, or they may not seek social approval. So in order to seek social acceptance and seek social approval, in order to avoid any kind of fun and ridicule, they want to buy products which others in their social class are using, and so they turn to others for advice. So they look to others in their reference group and in their social class. And this is more true for products which are publicly viewed and used in visible settings. We have discussed this earlier, where we spoke about Bearden and Edsel's model, where we saw how the social class has an impact on the product and on the brand that you buy. So people will seek information for products which are publicly viewed and used in visible settings. So the different kinds of products where you seek information, or where consumer seeks information, is where it's a high involvement product, or where it's a matter of social acceptance and social approval, or it is where a product is a new product and the consumer would feel more comfortable talking to others or taking others' opinions before venturing into a purchase process for the new product. So these are the various reasons why people will prefer an interpersonal, informal, word-of-mouth communication. Now, the sources evaluation of the product or service offering may be favorable or unfavorable. When a person is happy or satisfied with the purchase of a particular brand, he or she would speak in favor of it. On the other hand, when he is dissatisfied with the purchase of and usage of a product or a brand, he or she would be aggrieved, and his complaints with the retailer have not been addressed properly, he would vent out his dissatisfaction and would speak unfavorably about the brand or about the dealer. So this is more for products which are high involving products. So depending upon word of mouth, depending upon the sources evaluation of the product or service offering, the word of mouth can be both positive and negative, with negative word of mouth having a more profound and deeper impact. So what we are talking of here is that the source may think favorably or unfavorably about a product or service offering. When he thinks favorably about it, it means that he is satisfied with the product or with the brand and the usage of the same, and he likes to talk favorably about it. But in case he is dissatisfied, it would actually mean that he would be speaking unfavorably of such product or of such brand, and he will address his if his complaints or if the issues are not addressed properly, he will not only speak negatively about the product or the brand, but also speak negatively about the store. And such negative comments hold greater weight than the favorable statements or favorable opinion made about a product or service offering. Finally, we come to the type of communication partner. Communication partners may be of different kinds. People may seek information and advice from family, friends, peers, colleagues, or acquaintances, which are generally your primary reference groups. They may also be influenced by celebrities and experts, which are secondary reference groups. In order to gain social acceptance and approval, people generally prefer seeking advice from the people of the primary reference groups, and they prefer choosing products or brands which are used by people in their positive reference groups. Sometimes they are attracted by people of the immediately upper class, so and they aspire what we call as aspirational reference groups, and so they want to be like them, they want to behave like them, and so they seek advice from them, and they are attracted towards social mobility, and they move up the social ladder. And in that case, they look up to people of the higher up, people of the immediately upper class, and they are influenced by aspirational reference groups. So this brings us to a conclusion on our decision with respect to the dynamics of informal interpersonal word of mouth communication. Now let us move now to the interpersonal flow of communication theory, where we talk about two theories: the two-step flow of communication theory and the multi-step flow of communication theory. Now, there are a large number of theories which have been proposed which try to combine the effect of both marketing communication and interpersonal word of mouth communication. So, various researchers have proposed different kinds of theories which try to come up with a blend of both the marketing communication and the informal interpersonal word of mouth communication. Two such theories are the two-level flow of communication theory and the multi-level flow of communication theory. In both the theories, we will see that the opinion leader is a vital link. He has a vital role to play in the entire communication process, and he has a role to play in the transmission of information. So we'll start with the two-step flow of communication theory. According to this particular theory, if we see here, the message which is the information content from the marketer flows from the mass media, both print and broadcast audiovisual media, to the opinion leader, and from there it is transmitted to the masses or to the opinion receivers. So the theory is two-stepped in the sense that it presents opinion leaders as the direct recipients of information from the mass media, and it is they who in turn transmit this interpret it and transmit this information to the general public or to the masses who are consumers or the potential. So the opinion leaders acts as a middleman. You have the step one where information flows in a single direction, one way, from the from the impersonal mass media. Impersonal mass media meaning the broadcast media, print media, and the audiovisual broadcast media. It moves to the opinion leaders, and in step two, it flows from opinion leaders who interpret or verify or assimilate the information that have received from impersonal mass media. They transmit it to the opinion receivers, who are the masses, in our case the publics or the consumers or the prospects and the consumers. So you have the stage one or the step one where information from impersonal sources from the marketers and moves to the opinion leader, and then from step two the opinion leader receives this, interprets this, analyzes it, comprehends it, and then transmits it to the masses or the opinion receivers or the general public. Now here, while the theory lays emphasis on the vital role the opinion leaders play, it rejects the belief that mass media left alone can influence the masses and enable a sale. So while it lays emphasis on the vital role that opinion leaders play, it rejects the belief that mass media alone can have a big role to play and it can influence the masses and enable a sale. So as a major contribution, the theory supports the premise that social interaction between people serves as a major means of spread of information, development of attitudes, and leading to acts of behavior. So opinion leaders are more likely to be influenced. The opinion receiver is more likely to be influenced by an opinion leader than directly by the mass media. So this theory basically acknowledges the fact that social interaction between people, between opinion leader and opinion receivers, will have a major hold on a share of information, development of attitudes, and subsequent act of behavior. So it gives a lot of weightage to the vital role that is played by an opinion leader who transmits this information to the opinion receivers, and this information that he transfers or transmits has greater weight than information coming from impersonal the mass media or through marketers' information. So it basically, the theory lays emphasis on the role played by the opinion leader. But the problem with this theory is that it kind of underplays or underestimates the role that mass media directly has to play on the opinion receivers or on the masses. So we go beyond, and we you know, with passage of time, it was seen that the theory came to be regarded as inadequate and as inaccurate on account of following. One, you know, the opinion leaders are not generic in nature. They are specific to a particular product or service category and will vary from product category to another. So an expert in one product category will not be an expert in another product category. This was one shortfall or one limitation of this theory. Second is, opinion leaders are not a permanent elite, and different social groups have their different opinion leaders. Also, as per the theory, information flow is one way from opinion leader to opinion receiver. In reality, however, if we see, information does not flow one way, it happens both ways. So it goes from the source to the receiver, and from the receiver back it comes in the form of you know, kind of a feedback. Both the parties exchange their thoughts, their feelings, their experiences. So communication need not be one way. It also may not be initiated just by the opinion leader. It could be initiated by opinion receivers as well. It could be initiated by the masses. It could be somebody who's seeking an information. So it could be initiated by the masses who are seeking an opinion, who seek the leader or opinion leader for information and advice. So information does not flow only from the opinion leader to the receivers. It is both ways, and opinion leaders are not the only source of information for a consumer. The mass media equally has an important role to play and influences both the opinion leaders as well as consumers. So you know, also it was seen that marketers do not only and are always communicate with consumers via opinion leaders. Marketers do not communicate always with the consumers via an opinion leader. They directly communicate through various tools of the communication mix. In fact, the integrated marketing communication calls for a blend of the various tools to be used together so as to bring a maximum impact on the consumer. So consumers are also exposed to other sources of information, other means of information, and do not solely rely on the opinion leader. So that is why this theory came in for a criticism, and this gave way to the two flow theory of communication, gave way to the multi-step theory of communication. Again, I would repeat here that the major shortfall was that marketers can communicate with the masses directly. They do not always need an opinion leader. In fact, whatever the marketers say very often comes as a direct message to the consumers, especially when we talk about the various tools of the marketing, especially when we talk about a blend of the integrated marketing communication. Also, opinion leaders do not always say, they are not the ones who initiate a message or a conversation. They do not always provide information voluntarily. It may also be asked by the receiver. So communication happens both ways. It's not going to be initiated only by the leader, and it's not going to be that the receivers are going to be mere recipients. They could be actively involved in this exchange of information. So because of this theory came in for criticism, and it gave way to the multi-step theory of communication, which was subsequently proposed. So this multi-step theory of communication is more comprehensive in nature. It looks upon the flow of communication as a multi-stepped in nature, and it depicts the transmission of information from the media or from the marketer as a multi-stepped process. And here, keeping in line with the shortcomings of the previous theory, it proposes that information and influence are a two-way process. So opinion leaders can both influence and are influenced by opinion leaders. So if we have this, information is both, the opinion leaders are going to, here we see, can influence both and are influenced by the opinion receivers. So they influence the opinion receivers, they are also influenced by opinion receivers. So there's a two-way exchange. So what this theory tries to do is, one, it tries to say and tries to show how information is transmitted through a multi-stepped flow, where the marketer can directly influence the masses, or influence the opinion receivers or seekers. And two, the opinion leader, the interaction between the opinion leader and opinion receiver and seekers is going to be two-way. So opinion leader not only influences the opinion receiver but can also be influenced by the opinion receiver. So opinion leaders and opinion receivers, there's a two-way channel of communication that works. It's a two-way communication that works, and opinion leaders will influence opinion receivers, but they can, or seekers, but they can also be influenced by them. So let us move into this and see this here, where we look at the three components. In fact, four components: the mass media, the opinion leaders, the opinion receivers or seekers, and the information receivers. So here in step 1A, information through mass media flows simultaneously to opinion leaders, opinion receivers or seekers, and information receivers. So opinion seekers are those who solicit information and advice. They initiate the process from opinion leaders. Information receivers are those amongst the masses who neither influence or neither are influenced by others. So opinion seekers are those who seek information and advice from opinion leaders, and opinion receivers are those who receive without asking for such information from opinion leaders. They get this information from him. So the seekers are going to solicit or request opinion leaders. On the other hand, receivers are just going to act passively and receive information without asking any help or any advice from opinion leaders. There is another group which we refer to as information receivers, who are those amongst the masses who neither influence nor are influenced by others. Now in step 2, both information and influence are transmitted from opinion leaders to opinion receivers and to opinion seekers. So opinion leaders share their experiences, their knowledge, their information with opinion receivers, and opinion receivers react with their own, come up with their own reactions with respect to any kind of opinion or value judgment or beliefs. So both information and influence are transmitted from the opinion leader to the opinion receiver, and from opinion receiver to the opinion leader. So information and influence is transmitted both ways. And in step 3, if we see, the two-way exchange process is completed, and it shows the transfer of information from the opinion receiver to the opinion leader. So if we look at step 2, both information and influence are transmitted from opinion leader to opinion receivers and to opinion seekers. And in steps 3, the two-way exchange process is completed, and it illustrates the transfer of information and the influence from opinion receivers to opinion leaders. So in 2 and 3, if we put them together, there is an exchange of information and influence from the opinion leader to the opinion receiver or seeker, and vis-a-vis from the opinion receiver to the opinion leader. So that's how a two-way exchange process is completed. Now in step 1B, if you see, the information from mass media is going to the information receivers, who neither influence or are going to be influenced by others. So this mass media is impacting information receivers. Mass media is also impacting directly opinion receivers and opinion seekers. So there is an element called opinion leader, but mass media also directly communicates with opinion receivers and seekers, as well as directly communicates with the information receivers. So this is how the model works. Now this particular model is an improvisation over the earlier existing two-step flow of communication theory. It tries to overcome some of the limitations. One, it says that all forms of mass media or mass communication basically affect the consumers directly. So here, if we see, opinion receivers, opinion seekers, as well as information receivers are all directly receiving information from the mass media. 2, transmission of messages from mass media is received by opinion leaders, opinion receivers, and opinion seekers in the same way. So whatever a message is going to be communicated to the opinion leader, the same message is going to be going to the opinion receivers and to the opinion seekers. So transmission of messages through mass media is received by opinion leaders, opinion receivers, and opinion seekers in the same fashion. Opinion leaders receive information from the mass media. They will interpret this information. They will, comprehend it, and and then forward it to the opinion receivers or to the opinion seekers. Opinion seekers, those who ask them for this information, and opinion receivers, those who do not ask, but the opinion leader voluntarily provides them with information. So whatever information is received from the mass media by the opinion leader is going to be interpreted by him and transmitted accordingly. And consumers, which is opinions receivers and opinion seekers, receive information in two ways. One, they receive information directly from the mass media, and two, they receive the processed and interpreted versions of information from the opinion leader. So, this is how there has been an improvisation in this particular theory over the earlier existing theory. Now, the distinction between opinion leaders and opinion receivers is fluid and vague. Opinion leaders are not generic in nature. They are specific to a product or service category. They are also not a permanent elite, and a person may serve as an opinion leader for some product and for some social groups, and be a receiver for another product and for another social group. And there is always a two-way exchange of information, and both opinion leader and opinion receivers or seekers interact with one another. Opinion leaders provide the receivers or the seekers with information, advice, and they relate their experiences. In return, they gather more information or personal opinion or beliefs and experiences from receivers or seekers. So this leads to an addition or modification or deletion of thoughts which are present in the opinion leader, and adds to what we have referred earlier as associated network. So the process is ongoing with transmission of added on or modified bits of information to be passed on from one to another. Now, this is how we see that this theory is an improvised version over the existing two-stepped flow of information theory, and we see how the mass media impacts the opinion leaders and the information receivers, the opinion receivers and the opinion seekers similarly. And here we have the mass media having an impact on information receivers as well. And then we saw how the communication between leader and the receiver or the seeker takes place as a two-way interaction, where the seeker may ask the leader opinion leader for help, for assistance, for advice, or for sharing of experiences, or the opinion leader on his own voluntarily provides it, and it goes to the opinion receiver. Now, this is what brings us to the more important, how is interpersonal communication more relevant for marketers. So we have discussed how consumers are exposed to two kinds of information, two kinds of communication: marketing communication and interpersonal communication, and how interpersonal communication is regarded as more valid. It is something which is given a lot of importance by the consumers, and while the marketing communication can succeed in informing people about product or service offerings and creating a favorable attitude, the final push actually comes from this interpersonal, informal, word of mouth communication. People are influenced by people in their social groups or in their reference groups, and consumers prefer a word of mouth communication over other marketing communication because they feel that it is more credible with no ulterior motives. So word of mouth communication reduces the amount of physical or cognitive effort that a consumer will have to put in to make a purchase. It makes purchase decisions more easy, more sure, more certain for them. People also turn to experts, people turn to opinion leaders for advice. They also look at the reference groups, and so the credibility of the source is very important. The impact of informal interpersonal communication is affected by the nature of the product or service which a person is wanting to buy. So in cases the product is high involving, technically complex, risky, or where the product is new, people would indulge into word of mouth communication to be more comfortable while making the final purchase decision. When people are satisfied with the product or service offering, they speak very favorably about it, and when they are dissatisfied, they would talk unfavorably. Of course, favorable information and communication holds much more weight than the unfavorable communication and unfavorable information about a particular product or service offering gathers more weight, and it's more bearing on consumers' decision making rather than the formal information, for the favorable information or the positives. So it's very important that marketers continue to satisfy their customers, because positive word of mouth is favorable, is actually something which is favorable, which will be more fruitful, and in case there is a negative word of mouth, or in case there is a unfavorable communication, then the consequences will really be disastrous, because unfavorable and negative word of mouth has a larger or heavier bearing on consumer psyche than favorable information. So negative information has a more profound and a deeper effect. Now, this brings us to a conclusion of our session on interpersonal communication and influence. The references for further reading: Loudon and Della Bitta, Consumer Behavior, Tata McGraw-Hill; Peter and Olson, Consumer Behavior and Marketing Strategy, McGraw-Hill Higher Education; Shipman and Kanuk, Consumer Behavior, Prentice Hall; and Wells and Prensky, Consumer Behavior, John Wiley and Sons. The frequently asked questions: Question 1, differentiate between marketing communication and interpersonal communication. Question 2, discuss advantages of word of mouth communication. And question 3, discuss critically the two-step flow of communication theory. Coming to a quiz, a self-evaluation test. Section A, true false. 1, the credibility of a source is equally important in word of mouth communication. So is it true or false? Absolutely true. The credibility of source is equally important in WOM communication. 2, WOM communication can be positive and negative, with the former having a more profound and deeper effect. Is this a true statement or a false? This is a false statement, with the latter having a more profound and deeper effect is the correct statement. The word should not be former, it should be latter, because negative word of mouth has more profound and deeper effect. 3, opinion leaders are generic in nature. This is again false. Opinion leaders are not generic in nature. Fill in the blanks. 1, any kind of information, informal interpersonal communication that takes place between individuals as consumers is known as DAS communication. It is now known as informal interpersonal communication or word of mouth communication. 2, the marketing message or information content can be classified into 3 types: product news, advice, and personal experiences. 3, as per the two-step flow of communication theory, acts as a middleman in the entire process of communication. Opinion leaders. 4, are those amongst the masses who are neither influenced or nor influenced by others. They neither influence nor are influenced by others. Answer is information receivers. Multiple choice questions. 1, consumers are more likely to seek information in which of the following cases: A, when the product is expensive, technically complex, risky, and not purchased frequently; B, when the product is related to lifestyle, image, and social class; C, both A and B; D, neither A nor B. Answer is C, both A and B. Question number 2, according to the theory, opinion leaders can both influence and are influenced by opinion receivers. A, two-step flow of communication; B, reference group; C, multi-step flow of communication theory; D, opinion leadership theory. The answer is multi-step flow of communication theory. Short answers. Mention the factors that impact word of mouth communication. So with this we come to a conclusion of our session on interpersonal communication and influence. We shall be speaking about opinion leaders in the next session. Thank you.